Hi, my name is Tyler Dratch, and I'm an Eisendrath Legislative Assistant here at the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism in DC. And I'm here today with Rabbi Joel Simons, who works for the RAC out in California. And today we're going to talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's new proposed rule related to unfair payday lending. And we're going to talk about what the Jewish tradition might have to say about fair lending in our society and how some of our sacred Jewish texts might relate to today's rule. So thanks for being here, Rabbi Joel.
My pleasure.
The first thing I wanted to ask you about was fair lending in the biblical society. What does lending look like in the Torah? And are Jews allowed to make loans?
It's a great question, and as we engage in this issue of our time, we really look towards our tradition, and we find amazing areas both in the Torah and in the rabbinic tradition, which really talk about fair lending. We see in the book of Exodus in the Torah, the idea that one can and should loan to another, but one should not act as a creditor. One should not seek interest on the loan. Now, when one looks at this in the modern times, even in the ancient times, we have to ask ourselves, was this enacted? Was this actually a rule that one can enact in actual society? And we don't know, but we do know that our tradition holds up for us a bar for how a just and equitable society should live. And this idea that one should loan to another person without seeking interest, that is a beautiful concept. That is, if one is in need, they should receive providing for their needs.
Right, and we know that in the Torah, even in this context of Jews providing loans to others, the concept of the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, comes in, where people are required to forgive these loans. So can you tell us a little bit about what the sabbatical year is, what the Shemitah year is, and then talk about how loans are involved and what that has to say about fair lending?
So the Shemitah year, or the seventh year, the sabbatical year, we actually see this in our life today. If one is so privileged to be able to receive a sabbatical from work, it's every seventh year or so, one receives time off to replenish, to rejuvenate. Just as every 7 days one takes a Sabbath to rest and replenish, one can take a sabbatical year. The Shemitah year was also used in accordance with the land. For 6 years, one would work the land, and then on the seventh year, one would give the land a rest. This idea that the land has needs as well. And actually, when one looks at agricultural laws and rules, giving the land a rest does make the soil more fertile. And in this idea of the Shemitah year, the land receiving a rest, there was also this concept that one's loans, one's debts are forgiven. So in the seventh year, if one is unable to pay back their debts are forgiven. Now again, can this concept be enacted in today's society? I'm not sure. Was it enacted back then? Again, we're not sure. But what this concept suggests is that it shows after 7 years, if one is unable to pay back their loans, let's not continue to have this burden on themselves. Let's give them an opportunity. Let's give them the Shemitah year to be able to forgive their loans, to be able to forgive their debts, so that one can have an opportunity to lift themselves out of this burden, that one can have an opportunity to thrive and to survive, so that one does not spend another 7 years just trying to get out of debt.
Thanks. It sounds like the Shemitah is at least an aspiration for the fair lending practices that we would want to see.
Yes.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was that many of us know the biblical prohibition, do not place a stumbling block before the blind. How did the rabbis understand that related to unfair lending?
It's a brilliant way that the rabbis were able to take this concept that so many of us know and use all the time, as we should, and connect it to this idea of fair lending. When we look into the Mishnah, the innocent said that if one cannot get out of debt and one continues to loan and put interest on it, then we are putting a stumbling block in front of the blind. And when we look at today's society, when we know that one cannot pay back high interest, and we still loan them money with this high interest, and we know their background and we know the debt that they're in, then we're putting a stumbling block in front of them. We're not allowing them to succeed, and we're not allowing them to thrive. And again, we are putting this roadblock in front of them that they're never really going to be able to get around. on. So this idea of the stumbling block in front of the blind, used in so many concepts of the justice work that we engage within. For fair lending, the rabbis were right to connect it here, and I think so are we in our modern day time. So after understanding what our tradition says about fair lending and how we can approach it from our faith, what can we do today? What is the CFPB doing, and how can we get involved in our local communities and within our congregations?
So now is actually a really critical time to get involved in this fight for fair lending. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau just released a proposed rule that would consider it an abusive and unfair lending practice to issue a short-term loan with a certain interest rate above 36% and not consider your customer's ability to repay that loan. So if this rule is adopted, what it would mean is that anytime a lender wanted to issue a short-term payday loan of less than 45 days, they would first need to get a credit report and to determine if the customer would be able to repay that loan. And this is really important because as it exists now, sometimes someone takes out a short-term loan, and then because of all the other expenses they need to pay, they have to take out a second short-term loan to repay their first, and then a third to repay their second, and they end up in a cycle of debt that just becomes really unsustainable. So we hope that this loan will actually tell payday lenders, if you want to issue short-term loans with high interest rates, you have to first make sure that you're not leading your customer into this cycle of debt, that it needs to help them, to lift them up, and to not shut them down. So
and then what can we do to get involved? How can we lend our voice to this?
Thanks. So the best way is going to be to visit our website, www.rac.org/predatory lending. And there we have so many resources. One, to help you understand what this rule is about. We actually have a source sheet there to study what the Jewish tradition has to say about fair lending, which includes the texts we talked about today, and also some more. And most importantly, on that website, you can actually submit a comment directly to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to let them know about your support for this rule. And it's going to take all of our voices together, letting them know that this is a strong rule for them to implement it and for them to finally put it into practice. So we hope that you'll go on the website, read what's there, study the Jewish texts and this rule with your community, and then finally submit a comment, encourage others to submit comments so that our voices together can be strong and can be heard, and that this rule will be passed.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And this really is an issue that affects all of our communities and that we can and should be involved with.
Thank you, Rabbi Joel.
Thank you very much, Tyler.